Pokémon is one of the most accessible, kid-friendly video game franchises out there, but for such a cheerful, colorful series, there sure are a lot of people who suffer from PTSD, post-Cynthia stress disorder. It's clear from the memes scattered around the internet that the battle against the champion Cynthia is the most memorable moment of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and one of the toughest battles in the whole franchise. And it's also clear from the discourse around it how much of an impact the music had on this moment. From the first notes of Cynthia's theme triggering Vietnam-style PTSD flashbacks to references in other games immediately letting players know they're about to get their team wiped. To talk about the music of this battle against Champion Cynthia in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, we have to cover two separate tracks. The theme that plays during the actual battle, and the approaching Cynthia theme that plays as you enter the champion's chamber and talk with her just before the battle starts. Let's take a look at these pieces and try to figure out just how Cynthia's theme manages to strike fear into the hearts of trainers everywhere. The approaching Cynthia theme is a Beethovenian solo piano piece. The huge accented chords and dark diminished harmony create a palpable sense of drama, and the blazing fast triplet runs evoke a virtuosity, together instilling a sense of just how intimidating this trainer is supposed to be. At the same time, the fact that this is a solo piano piece, standing in contrast to the general sound of the rest of the game's soundtrack, lends Cynthia's character a sense of elegance and poise. The opening chords of the piece immediately grab your attention, the super low bass triplets spring launching us up to these big, crunchy 5-note chords up top. We quickly cycle through a sequence that sets up the dominant chord of the key, F-sharp 7. This B minor over F sharp chord sets up the key of B minor, and then the following G6 over E sharp to C sharp 7 flat 9 chains together two crunchy chords that both resolve to F sharp. But the F sharp chord we land on leaves us hanging, using an augmented 7th chord sound to avoid a feeling of resolution, and then we sit on this stretched out F sharp 7 flat 9 chord. To understand the sound of this piece, we have to understand the dominant 7 flat 9 chord. This chord carries a ton of great dark energy and dissonance as the 5 chord in a minor key. We have our classic dominant chord, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, with the 3rd raised up from what would naturally occur in a minor key to lead better to the tonic and give the chord that classical sound. In the key of B minor, this would be an F sharp 7 chord. Adding the flat 9th of the chord on top, a G natural over F sharp 7, does 3 things simultaneously. It adds more dissonance to the chord by giving us a flat 9th interval against the root, which sounds pretty gross by itself. It makes the resolution to the tonic B minor stronger by leading by half step to the 5th of the tonic chord. And it adds in the color of a diminished chord, because if you take out the root of this 5 chord, you'll notice that from the 3rd to the 9th spells an A sharp diminished 7 chord. This is the basic harmonic sound the piece uses to evoke a feeling of intimidation. Check out the feeling this F sharp 7 flat 9 chord creates and how smoothly it leads into the tonic B minor chord that starts off the melody. When the melody comes in, we can see the left-hand accompaniment shift from short, punchy chords to flowing triplet arpeggios, contrasting the jittery rhythm of the melody above it. This type of left-hand pattern is a very common pianistic thing, but played at this tempo it sounds incredibly virtuosic. The melody and harmony of the piece here are also pretty straightforward, but played at this tempo with these crunchy chord voicings give it a dramatic intensity. The melody of this approach theme actually plays into the battle theme too, so let's take a look at it real quick. Each 2-bar phrase is built off of one single chord tone from the underlying chord, embellished with the neighboring notes on either side of it. We start on the 3rd of our tonic B minor chord, which extends itself with double neighbor motion. I talked about the double neighbor embellishment at length in my recent Mario underwater theme video, but suffice to say, it's a way to extend one melody note into 4 in a satisfying way. We get the same kind of embellishment of the fifth of the chord in the following phrase, bringing us to 4 bars of melody with almost no creative decision-making required. The piece moves to the 4 chord, E minor, and uses a similar embellishment of 1 chord tone that I don't think has a name, but I always think of it as a run-through enclosure. We start on the upper neighbor, a step above our targeted chord tone, resolve down to the chord tone, dip down 1 semitone below our target chord tone, and then resolve back up to that chord tone, running through the targeted note before resolving to it at the end. This type of melodic embellishment always sounds great. You likely already unconsciously associate it with the beautiful fairy fountain theme from The Legend of Zelda. This move is used to embellish these minor chords, the 3rd of E minor and the 5th of the B minor that follows. The final 4 bars of the melody simply walk down the minor scale over the 5 chord, and then finish off this resolution back to B minor by embellishing the tonic B with the return of the double neighbor embellishment. This melody is simple in the way that all elegant melodies are, spinning out a super strong and satisfying 12 bars of music out of the bare minimum amount of musical ideas. Then, it's back to more crazy triplet arpeggios over an F♯7 flat 9 chord. This last section uses the same melodic embellishments we saw before, but they're a little obscured by the new arrangement. Both the right and left hands are now giving a constant barrage of triplets, trading between arpeggios of the 1 and 5 chords as we move through the section. Isolating the top note of each of these right-hand arpeggios reveals the melody, a double neighbor embellishment of the 3rd of our tonic B minor, and then the same embellishment of our root, ending off with some simple scalar motion up to the 5th and resolving back down to the root. Besides the immaculate vibes provided by this introductory piece, it also serves the very important role of providing context for the main battle theme. Context determines how you experience a piece of music, and great pieces of music take the opportunity to set the scene properly so that the music hits the listener the way the composer intended. If you're trying to write something fast and high energy and you just dive right into it, the listener is going to be hearing it in the context of whatever music they're already familiar with. The music will be perceived very differently by a lo-fi hip-hop fan than a speed metal head. But if you use an intro that's slow and brooding only to explode into your fast high-energy piece, the music will be that much more impactful and everyone will hear it as fast and high-energy compared to the introduction. The cut from the approach cue to the 2-bar intro of the actual battle theme is quite jarring, grabbing your attention with the sudden shift from a quick triplet feel to this slower straight 8th note arpeggio. This intro then speeds up into a much faster pounding disco rhythm as it crescendos into the main groove of the tune, building up your anticipation of the battle with it. The bouncing straight 8th offbeats feel particularly driving in contrast to the approach theme's fluid triplet feel, and the introduction of low bass and drums hit so much harder after being set up by solo classical piano. As much as the approach theme set an intimidating tone for the battle, the shift into the battle theme captures this perfect feeling that something's about to go down. The piece immediately establishes a threatening aura by using the flat second scale degree, A natural in the new key of G sharp minor. I talk about this quality much more in depth in my video on the Phrygian mode, but this flat 2 note specifically is great for establishing a sense of threat. And this first bar moves straight down a G sharp minor arpeggio with the flat second added to capture this feeling with efficiency. Like I said before, the melody of Cynthia's theme builds on the melody of the approach theme, although it might not be obvious since the two pieces do sound very different. The main melodic figure is this 2-bar phrase, starting on the tonic, G sharp, and then embellishing this G sharp with another run-through enclosure figure, only this time using the flat second scale degree above it to evoke that threatening G sharp Phrygian sound. This phrase is repeated down a whole step, and then the following phrase gives an interesting inversion of the same idea. Starting on the root of the underlying E chord, we move up an E arpeggio and then get this figure winding chromatically from the 4th to the 5th of the chord. You can see how it takes the first 2 notes of the initial melodic figure, but instead of resolving chromatically to a G sharp, we continue up chromatically to land on a B, which ends up sounding like a much brighter version of the same melody. It's a development of the melodic idea that moves the energy from a place of hopelessness to anticipation. This excitement pays off the second time through the melody, where this rising E to F sharp progression resolves to a G sharp major chord rather than a G sharp minor chord, shifting the music suddenly to the parallel major key. This bright shift is continued through the following 8 bars as we move into an upbeat melody in the key of C sharp major. But this ray of hope can't last, and it's after this C sharp major bit that the music doubles down on threat with another key shift to B minor. The bass line is based sort of off the Hungarian minor scale, a minor scale with a raised 7th and raised 4th, and the raised 4th gives the music an unsettling edge. Adding to this is the use of the flat second in the line to mix in some more threatening Phrygian energy, adding up to make a scale that I couldn't find a name for online. The Hungarian Phrygian scale? Sure. Over top of this oppressive bass figure, the melody comes in with a bright and upbeat B major line that contrasts the surrounding accompaniment in a bit of a jarring way. After one statement of this melody, it rises up a half step to a C major line over the same B minor bass figure, the 2 parts clashing horribly. This hopeful melody layered so dissonantly over such a dark bass line feels like the music is mocking you. In response to your hopeful anticipation, Cynthia and her Garchomp are laughing right in your face. This melody eventually gives way to these insane alien lines that jump all over the place in a way that sounds totally nonsensical. This closing section of the loop just screams, you don't know what you've gotten yourself into, do you? These details are draped around a skeleton that will feel very familiar to any Pokemon fan. Cynthia's theme was composed by Junichi Masuda, the composer behind the very first Pokemon soundtracks, and everything from the 1 to flat 7 to flat 6 to flat 7 chord progression, and the disco bass line, to these chromatic scale flurries, even to the conceptual structure of starting off minor and moving to a much more upbeat major sound farther in, is pulled from the vocabulary of battle music going back to the original Pokemon Red and Blue. These elements connect Cynthia musically to the lineage of Pokemon battle music going back a decade earlier, and, imbued with the threatening Phrygian flat second, the merciless altered chromaticism of the altered Hungarian scale bassline, and the contrast against the classical piano approach theme that set it up, we have a theme that perfectly characterizes Cynthia and primes her battle to have an impact on the player that is clearly still resonating with people to this day. Thank you all so much for watching. Head over to my Patreon if you want to support the channel and pick up my full transcriptions of these themes, and I'll see you all in the next one.